So of all the things, I do the knives and the guns, but I'm also a certified master gardener. A lot of people say, oh, hey, this guy's an expert because he's in 15 gunfights. Well, maybe the guy that wasn't in any gunfights can tell you better how to avoid being in a gunfight. One day when I got off the school bus, she'd been murdered. So a group of kids that were 15, I was 12 at the time, they were 15, went in there basically trying to get money and shot her in the back of the head and killed her.
Spartan Mode?
Yeah.
Mr. Adam Boyce. That's your name, right?
That's the name I can tell publicly. Yes, Adam Boyce is my name.
Oh yeah, that's right. Can you talk about not the details of your job, but what you do for a living?
So for my actual job, I teach firearms, heavy weapons, play with explosives. That's what I kind of get to do for a government agency. Yeah.
Well, that's not a bad job to have.
No, I love it.
And you started training MBC in?
I want to say 2015. So it's been about 7 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you became an instructor in 2018.
I believe 18, yeah.
All right. Yeah. I was there. That was my first camp.
That was the first one, huh? Yeah.
Now you've been training people in martial blade concepts. Are you training them outside of work in anything else?
So currently MBC is the big thing that I teach outside of work. Yeah, that's kind of the focus for right now. I'm going to start opening it up again for public classes for firearms, but because I feel like the knife is such an area that people there's not a lot of good training out there, that's what I focus my attention on.
What was it that drew you to martial blade concepts?
So it was actually, I was a defensive tactics instructor for the agency I work for, and when we were doing some of the counter knife stuff, it worked when you were going super slow and they were giving you perfect angles and they weren't putting any force on it whatsoever. But once we started amping it up and trying to defend ourselves with it, it was like, this isn't working. So what I started doing is going and researching as many knife instructors as I could find, studying on YouTube, going to seminars, going to classes, and just trying to find something that I thought would be most appropriate for what I do for a living and then also for a self-defense situation. And most of the systems I found, there's just the legal considerations weren't a part of it. The logic wasn't really there. It was like, hey, I'll stab this guy and he's gonna burst into flames and the fight's over. And there just wasn't that structure or really thought through to our modern context to it. So luckily enough for me, I was teaching defensive tactics defensive tactics class, and a gentleman came in the back of the room dressed up really nice. And I walked back there and said, hey, do you have any questions? He's like, no, I'm good. And anyway, long story short, we talked back and forth, and he's like, I said, do you have any questions? And he's like, no. It's like, do you teach any martial arts? And he said, well, I do judo. It's like, do you do anything else? He said, I just started doing some knife stuff and I'm going to this seminar thing, and when I come back, I need a training partner. So we started training after that MBC, and it's been history after that. So long story short, a lot of rambling, but it took a long time to find it, but that's kind of how I got there.
What originally got you into like martial arts or defensive training? Was that something that, like, as a kid, you're like, oh, I saw that in a movie and I want to do that? Or was it, later on some event provoked it?
Yeah, so crazy enough, there's two things that got me going. When I was 12 years old, I lived in a little town called Grant, Idaho. More cows than people there. There's a gas station just 100 yards from my house where I had a very close friend that she owned the store. One day when I got off the school bus, she'd been murdered. So a group of kids that were 15, I was 12 at the time, they were 15, went in there basically trying to get money and shot her in the back of the head and killed her. And it kind of changed my whole perspective on life, because I'm this little farm boy from Idaho, and somebody near and dear to me was killed. And I thought I'd never want to allow this to happen to anybody else I know or love. So that's kind of what got me kind of thinking about defending myself. But probably the thing that got me more into martial arts was when I was on SRT, we would always kind of goof around a little bit and wrestle around. And I had a hoodie on one day. One of the SRT guys came up behind me and choked me out, and I was like, this isn't cool. So then I started doing a little jiu-jitsu and some other the martial arts type of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of what got me going that path.
Wow, that's incredible. I feel like there's a lot of people, especially today, where it's almost been trained out of us. We don't see a need to defend ourselves or know that. And when it hits home like that, I think, well, anyone who's logical stands up and takes notice and says, I need to change this, do something about it.
Yep.
What is it that drives you to keep going with training, like outside of your job?
Outside my day job?
Yeah.
I find just training with people and giving people something that's beneficial to them, that potentially has the potential of saving their life, is a very satisfying thing. Also, just the people that tend to be attracted to the stuff that I teach are just good people. They genuinely care about other people, and I love surrounding myself with other individuals that want to help others, that want to be a good person. You know, they don't need to tell you war stories or anything crazy. They just want to be better. And that's really what drives me to teach outside of what I do for a living, is having these great conversations with people and meeting people that are just good people.
I think it's a very important thing that you're doing. And I guess if I could, because I don't know the answer to this, what do you think it is about society where we've outsourced our well-being and safety? Why do you think that's happened?
Yeah, I think it's came from just years and years and years of trying to make life easier. You know, we have fast food, we have, you know, instant things on our phone. We can watch a movie right now. Whereas, you know, when I was a kid back in the 80s, it's like, you don't get to pick what you watch at this moment. You will watch what's on TV if you want to watch it.
3 channels.
Yeah, and I think that mindset of I'm always going to have what I want right now at this moment, we've kind of taken a little bit of personal responsibility away from kind of who we are as a people.
Mm-hmm. How do we try and get that back in a broader sense? In my mind, you know, I think like, you know, you take driver's ed in high school. You know, I think there should be some form of like maybe Tai Chi, like a soft martial art. There should be like a hunter safety or firearm safety.
Yeah.
And then perhaps a course on like yoga and meditation. Like those should be standards to me.
Yeah.
With how everything's going, I don't think that's really going to happen in public schools, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we make change? How do we get people to sort of stand up and pay attention and understand your well-being is your well-being? It's not someone else's responsibility.
That's the $1 million question. It really is, because I think, you know, personal responsibility, ownership is something that is a critical component of all of that, but very few people understand and actually implement in their own lives. So I don't know what the answer for that is. I wish I could tell you, like, bippity boppity boo, here it is, but like, I don't have the answer for that.
Yeah. I think what's transpired over the last 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, has been very interesting. We've seen a lot of structures in society sort of break down or falter that we've taken for granted for a long time. And see the crime rates skyrocket, sort of in response to that. Where do you see what you do fitting into the context of what's happening now and the importance of it? You
know, it's interesting that you actually mention it in that context, because I have seen an increase of people of all different personalities and that have been attracted to what I do that a year or two ago wouldn't have been at all. So I think you're kind of on onto something there, as far as people are starting to see a little bit of, hey, the government is not always going to be here to help me. You know, I'm not always going to have, you know, cheap fuel prices or whatever. I'm not as safe as I thought I was. But I don't know how you instill that in anybody without them kind of coming to that realization themselves. But for those that are kind of awakening a little bit and kind of coming to that light, I think it's a great way to start. Because like I said, I teach firearms for a living, but not everybody can be super proficient with a handgun, especially when it comes to, I'm going to draw my gun out under pressure and do what I need to do in an environment of multiple people. maybe having some empty hand skills, some of the stuff that we'll teach from the CBC side, the counter blade concept stuff that we teach, is something that anybody can kind of pick up some basics and just learn some net violence of, I don't have to be proficient and spend 40 years learning a martial art, but if I can learn how to stick a pen in someone's eye, if they're causing me grievous bodily harm, just understanding those concepts of I don't have to spend a lot of time. I think that's where this really shines. The stuff that I teach is you don't have to put a lot of time into it, but you do have to put some time into it.
Could you elaborate a little bit on what net violence is for those who don't know?
Yeah, so net violence is basically going to be, if you look at like a jiu-jitsu context, right? So you're rolling around doing jiu-jitsu and you're being nice to your friend because you don't want to actually hurt your partner. The net violence is what can I actually bring to this fight? So maybe we're rolling around and this is a real context and I'm going to shove my thumb through the back of your skull. Taking that level of force up a whole nother level is something that some people will struggle with, but that really can be the deciding factor in life or death.
Excellent. As far as your, training methodology goes, what do you feel like helps you learn these things better and more efficiently?
I'm glad you asked that. That's something I've thought about a lot. Is why do I do what I do? If I'm going to learn something, I need to know the reason why up front. If I don't know, and it's like, hey, do this move, this move, this move, and it's like, well, cool, but what's that going to buy me? I have a really hard time staying focused on it. Additionally, if I can know what I'm doing, it gives me more of a knowledge-based approach to everything. So it doesn't have to be, I'm going to do the specific technique when they do something. I have kind of concepts and ideas that I can throw at a multitude of attacks or violence coming in my direction. So I think understanding why broadens your knowledge, but it also gives you a funneled track to learn to defend yourself.
Where do you see your training going? I mean, you're an MBC instructor.
Yeah.
You've trained in a lot of different weapon systems and different elements. So how do you feel your approach to things and what you're learning is going to evolve?
Yeah, so that's one thing that I always try to do. I try to take a minimum of 5 to 6 classes a year from other instructors so that I can go see how they teach, so that I'm not getting stagnant. I think that's one of the things that I see a lot with instructors is they get a certification in whatever system they teach and cool, I'm good to go. And it's like, well, things change. It's like the firearms, right? So you look at handguns and irons have been the way we shoot for years. And a lot of us were kind of dragging our feet to move to the red dot. But now you look at the red dot and it's like, hey, I can do some really cool things with that if I have an open mind and I'm willing to transition to that. For years we taught with the firearms, it's like I'm going to be front sight focused. And in a self-defense situation, when you look at it, you're a bad guy with a weapon and you're trying to attack me and I'm looking at this front sight, now I'm trying to justify my actions, but am I really focused on your hands or am I focused on the front sight? When you go to a red dot on a handgun, I'm looking at you, the dot is just kind of something in the background. I can totally focus my attention on you. And so those kind of changes that we think aren't going to happen, but do, that's why you need to be open to always training and learning new things. So aside from taking 5 to 6 classes, I always like to take a class of something I've never learned before. Take a course on, for example, I took a Master Gardener course. So of all the things, I do the knives and the guns, but I'm also a certified Master Gardener. But I think taking classes as an instructor outside of what you teach and being a total new student again is something that is really beneficial because you look at things completely different. Like, I teach martial arts or martial blade concepts and it's like, okay, this makes sense to me. But if I was a new student trying to learn this, how would I feel in this moment? What do I need to articulate or what do I need to describe or how can I describe it or what story can I share or what example can I use that will make the concept easier for them to understand?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at instructing. I got a degree in adult learning, a bachelor's degree in that, but I think I've learned more just teaching classes on how adults learn than going to a college course for, smart people finish a bachelor's degree in 4 years. It took me like 8, but
We all have our own pace.
Yeah.
We all have stuff going on.
Yeah.
Let me back up a second.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on Master Gardener? I did not expect that.
Yeah. So funny enough, so Master Gardener is a program through the college, and it's I can't remember if it was 8 or 10 weeks, something like that, 8 to 10 weeks, but it's everything from grafting fruit trees to greenhouses, plants, diseases, all those kind of things, that just a variety of knowledge in horticulture. I actually had so much fun with that. I took another course. It was like I want to say it was 6 months long, but it was a course on permaculture design. So it's basically how do you design sustainable agriculture, like food forests and swells and all those kind of crazy things. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when society collapses, you're on my team. You're calling it right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I was just having a conversation with a friend.
Yeah.
And he owns a dojo. He's been training in Po Ninjutsu for 27 years.
Yep.
And he spent like the past year and a half going down to James Yeager's place.
Yep.
Rest in peace, James Yeager. He just passed. But he spent a lot of time down there training. And I've also trained a lot with him at the site in Mount Carroll, Illinois. And I kind of talked to him. I said, you can shoot pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm still beating you, but you can shoot pretty well. And what about your other skill sets?
Yeah.
Because I think, we prepare a lot for a firearm interaction.
Oh, yeah.
Per se, if you're someone who trains. I feel like that's a heavy focus.
Yep.
The hand-to-hand, the knife stuff, that's not as heavy a focus.
No.
But those things might be becoming tertiary, secondary.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at other things, it's like, well, we've already seen in cities where riots have happened, things start to break down, cops aren't going to show up. We're just one coronal mass ejection from the sun away from having most of our electronics all over the world fried. Seeing as everything's digital these days.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That immediately puts us into a position where within days we'll be in tribes.
Yep.
So I asked him, what else are you doing?
Yeah.
And he wasn't really doing much.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe you should take some of that time and money, because firearms training costs a lot of money, especially if you have to travel.
Yep.
You're paying course fees. Why not learn some gardening skills?
Yep.
Some canning skills? What about learning to pick locks?
Yep.
I said, you might have to get into a place to, acquire some antibiotics or some painkillers or something before you'd have to potentially defend yourself by shooting someone.
Sure.
So what other skill sets do you think are important, perhaps in that context, if things devolve and we kind of go back 100 or 200 or 300 or so years?
Yeah, so I like that question. So if I was to analyze and say, okay, everything was no power grid, I had nothing, what things would I want? So number one, you talk about a tribe. Like, I want to make sure that wherever I live, that I have a group of people, a community, whether it's my neighbors or friends nearby, that we kind of share similar values as far as, our morals, that we stand up for the things that are right, but have that connection. So I'd say that first is probably have a good group. Second thing is you need to know how to purify water, whatever it is. If you're going to do a distillery, if you're going to do a charcoal filter, if you're going to have a hand pump, whatever it is, you need to figure that portion out, because if you don't have water, you don't last very long. The next thing I would say is probably know how to have a shelter if your home's compromised, or if your home's good, you need to make sure that you can sustain time there. Make sure it's set up properly so you have security in mind, that type of stuff. The other thing I'd say is critical is first aid. If the society collapses completely, that's something we would definitely take for granted right now, is we can run to the doctor if we need something, So I'd say those are the big things. Is I'd have a community. I would make sure that my home is set up, that I can do water filtration, whatever I need to do, gardening kind of along those lines, anything along those lines. And then first aid would be where I'd start, because even if the world doesn't collapse, a first aid comes in handy every day. You're more likely, like you say, be driving down the road and somebody gets an accident and you need to put a tourniquet on somebody than you are to draw your handgun and shoot somebody for the most part.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say that's a great place to start.
I like that answer. When you're training people, what do you think? I mean, we kind of go, we get training, and it's for ourselves.
Yeah.
But we have other members of family. So we have, sisters, brothers, daughters, sons.
Yep.
We have older people in our lives. What do you think is do you have any suggestions on how to start passing some of this on to our loved ones?
Yeah.
Because I think it's important. It's like I know some escaping restraint stuff, which is good knowledge to have. But if you're a big, strong guy like you and you have all of this tactical knowledge, you're probably not going to be the one getting abducted. It's going to be someone smaller, someone perhaps a little bit weaker in stature. How do we get those people interested in learning these skills, and then how do we transmit those skills to them?
That's awesome. So one of the things I teach in all my seminars is I'll tell people, I'll say, it doesn't matter how good you are. We could turn ourselves into ninjas, but if you're not aware of what's going on around your surroundings, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I think probably the best way to start with anybody that maybe doesn't have a lot of interest in it is start with a game. You could be out in public and say, okay, the first person that sees somebody in a red hat, they're gonna get a free ice cream cone, or I'm buying a drink, whatever your thing is. But start playing games where you're just kind of aware of what you're doing. And a lot of people start talking about awareness and they're like, oh man, I gotta sit in the corner, I gotta have my back to the wall, I'm watching, and it's like, that's the dude. If I'm the bad guy and I walk in, that's the guy I'm looking for, because he set himself up like that. And you don't need to be paranoid with any of this. So the idea is, I'm curious of my surroundings. So if I feel the wind gust come through because the door just opened, like in this public setting here, you just heard the door open. Oh, I heard a sound. Okay, cool. What is that? But I don't need to be like tactical Timmy the whole time. If you smell something different, if you feel something different, you see something different, if something just feels off, just be aware and curious of your surroundings. And that will do probably more for you than anything else, is don't be stuck down on your phone, and be aware of what's happening.
Yeah, cell phones have done a great job of creating more victims.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up about like your seating position. I've seen articles by like Greg Ellifritz on that, and it's just like, we have this mindset of like, oh yeah, this is what you do because a criminal is going to come in and this is going to happen. Yep. Well, they're people. They have the ability to learn too. Yep. Perhaps not in the best ways for society's sake, but they go off to a penitentiary, and there's a reason they call it con college.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of people will learn more things while they're in there, and when they get out, perhaps they don't change their lives, unfortunately. Yep. So yeah, I like that you brought that up, because I mean, if I was going to turn to a life of crime, those most advantageous observation points would be the first areas I'd look. Yep. So that's good. I think a lot of people don't think about that, and we just sort of get stuck in this. It kind of goes back to this, like, oh, we're just doing marksmanship training. Oh, yeah. Yep. We're not going to worry about our reloads or our draws per se, and we're going to buy 3 pieces rather than a few thousand rounds of ammunition, and learn to use that one tool very well. Yep. What is it that you want to do with your training moving forward? I know that like everyone's life kind of got interrupted over the last 2 years. So that kind of put some things on pause, and everyone's sort of had to reprioritize their life. Where do you see Spartan Mode going? Yeah, so that's a good question. With COVID, I canceled 13 seminars across the world and whatnot. And so I'm doing some private seminars for some police agencies and that type of stuff. My public seminars I haven't opened up again very fully yet. I would like to start pushing to the point again where I'm teaching one open enrollment seminar publicly
a month is what I'm looking at doing as far as the knife stuff goes. I am going to start incorporating more live fire pistol stuff, not just working with the certs and the inert stuff, so those are kind of the two areas I'm focusing on as far as the public goes, is probably one seminar of the MBC stuff a month, and then incorporating a few handgun courses. And then, luckily for me, with all the cancellations and stuff, when I go to my regular day job, I'm like a kid going to the candy store. It's like I get paid to shoot guns and learn new tactics and do stuff. So that kind of slows me down from doing a lot of other stuff because I love what I do for a day job so much. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. If someone wants to train with you, how do they go about it?
So they can look me up on Instagram at Spartan.mode or on my website, I don't think you have to say that anymore, but SpartanMode.com are probably the two easiest ways to find me.
Excellent. Well, was it the 20th anniversary of MBC
20th
Camp?
anniversary of camp, yeah.
Wow. And it's been an interesting ride these last few years. What are you most excited about for the future of MBC? We got a little change coming up.
Yep.
And some other people are going to be stepping up and giving Mr. Janich a little bit of a break on some tasks.
Yeah.
What are you excited about for the forthcoming evolution?
I think the thing I'm most excited about is that Janich will still be a part of it, but the thing I love about him and the way he does his system is it's still open to evolve. So if there's something that works better, we're still going to try and find a better way to do it. I think one of the things you find a lot with martial arts systems is, the guy that developed the system, he's dead, he's long gone, and this is the only way you do it. The cool thing is we still have Janich around, so we can continue to grow and evolve and kind of filter and develop and grow. But more than anything else, I'm just excited for the growth of MBC and the people that are attracted to the system, because it generally attracts just good people. So just meeting people and training is what I'm excited about with the future.
What would you recommend if someone wants to get into this stuff? They want to be more self-sufficient. They want to feel comfortable walking down the street. Sometimes we don't get to choose what neighborhoods we go through. Our jobs take us places, or maybe we're traveling and we stumble into an area and we feel uncomfortable or under-equipped for a certain thing or a situation. Someone wants to change that. What are you going to tell them?
I would say if you feel uncomfortable at any situation, find a way to get out of there. If you're walking down an alley and it's like, oh man, this doesn't feel good, turn and leave. The best self-defense stories are those that never happen. A lot of people say, oh, this guy's an expert because he's in 15 gunfights. Well, maybe the guy that wasn't in any gunfights can tell you better how to avoid being in a gunfight. So avoidance is always the best thing. If you feel uncomfortable about something, go another direction. Yeah.
It's great advice. And that individual who wants to start developing a skill set, where would you recommend starting?
So it's going to depend on them personally. I was kind of attracted to MBC because of the logic of it. If you want to learn MBC, you can reach out on the Martial Blade Concepts webpage, and he's got a list of instructors there that you could potentially find somebody in your area. He also has a distance learning program where you can get on there, and monthly there's videos and whatnot to kind of learn these techniques and tactics and concepts. If you can't find that, then start talking to your local law enforcement friends if you have anybody there, and see if they know anybody in the community. But we kind of live in a cool time now where you can get on YouTube and research any instructor and kind of find out what they're into. So probably the best advice is get on YouTube, look for how crime actually happens. Say, does that fit the context of how I live? If it does, how do I fill that void? How do I get better at it? And then start seeking those instructors that will help you best do it.
Awesome. Well, parting words here. I guess this is the last question I would ask you, but if you could just give me 3 words that would sum up your philosophy on training, what would they be?
3 words only. I can think of 4, which is hard for me to count. 1, 2, 3. All right. So I'd say have a plan. Yeah, have a plan.
All right. I know the second half.
Yeah, you know that one. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been great. I've known you for a few years now. Yeah. You're one of the kindest people I've met and also one of the most dangerous, which kind of seems to go hand in hand with a lot of the people we train with here.
It does, yeah. Yep.
So highly recommend anyone who has an opportunity to train with Adam Boyce.
Thank you.
Spartan Mode. And it's an honor to know you.
You too.
To be friends.
Yeah, appreciate it, John. Thank you.
All right.
You're not going to be in it, just off the side?
Yeah, I'm going to be over here.
All right.
Gently massaging myself to how awesome this conversation is.